I came home that night and the first thing I heard was laughter. Not the kind that warms a house, not the kind that lifts children out of their worries. No, this was sharp, mocking laughter, echoing from upstairs like a reminder that I no longer belonged in my own home. Don't miss this. From the very first line, you'll be pulled into a dark, emotional story of betrayal and revenge that will keep you watching until the very end. I paused at the door, my shoes still damp from the slush outside. My hands ached from the cold, my fingers stiff after a double shift at the diner. The clock over the stove said 11:42 p.m. I had been gone since sunrise. My body screamed for rest, but the sound of that laughter froze me in place. He was laughing. And my children were silent. I walked further inside, every step cautious, though I shouldn't have had to tiptoe in my own house. The living room smelled of wine and overcooked chicken. An empty plate sat on the table with crumbs scattered across it. She hadn't even bothered to clean up. Upstairs, I heard her voice, light, carefree, like the world was hers to play with. Then, almost hidden beneath, I thought I heard a faint cough. A child's cough. My chest tightened. I didn't call out. Instead, I slipped off my coat and hung it neatly the way I always did. He thought I was small, quiet, too tired to notice. That was her mistake. My boots clicked softly as I walked to the basement door. The wood felt colder than it should, the knob almost icy in my hand. When I opened it, the smell hit me, damp, mildew, dust that clung to every breath. Mom. A whisper came from below. Two small shapes huddled under a thin blanket at the bottom of the stairs. My twins. Their cheeks pale, their eyes wide. A half-empty bowl of rice sat on the floor, hardened from sitting too long. Shoo, I said, forcing a calm tone, though my heart cracked inside me. Go back to sleep for now. I'll be right here. They trusted me instantly. They always did. And that trust, that fragile trust, was the only thing keeping me from collapsing. I climbed back up, closed the basement door quietly, and smoothed my hair with trembling hands. Upstairs, the laughter rolled on, careless, cruel. I followed it. The hallway lights flickered. Another bill I had worked overtime to pay, another thing she never noticed. At the bedroom door, I stopped. She was sitting cross-legged on the bed, television glowing blue across her face. A glass of red wine in her hand. My blanket, my favorite quilt, draped around her shoulders. She looked at me and smiled as if she owned the air I breathed. You're home late, she said, her tone drenched in mockery. Yes, I answered, keeping my voice level. The diner was busy. She stretched, yawning, before sipping her wine. You really should rest more. You look exhausted. The words were dressed as concern, but the smirk ruined them. I didn't answer. Instead, I set my bag down carefully on the chair. Inside, hidden beneath old receipts and worn-out gloves, was something she had forgotten I still had. I didn't show it. Not yet. Where are the kids? I asked, though I already knew. He shrugged. Oh, they're fine. Probably asleep somewhere. They're such a handful, you know. That word, somewhere. My jaw tightened. I walked to the window, pulling back the curtain. Outside, the snow glowed under the street lamp. Silent still. I could see our neighbor's house across the street, lights off, everyone asleep. They didn't know what lived under my roof. Behind me, she chuckled again. You should be grateful, you know. I keep things under control while you're gone all the time. Under control, I repeated softly. My reflection in the glass showed a calm woman, but inside, storms raged. The room smelled of smoke. She had burned dinner again. A pan sat on the dresser as if she couldn't be bothered to take it back to the kitchen. The sight of it, the carelessness, stung more than the smell. I turned back to her. Did they eat? She raised a brow. Of course. I'm not a monster. Then she laughed again, as if the idea itself was a joke. That laugh. It drilled into my skull, mocking every hour I had spent washing dishes, scrubbing tables, smiling at strangers just to keep the lights on. I stepped closer, the floor creaking under my weight. She didn't move. Her eyes were glassy from the wine, her lips stained red. She thought she was untouchable. You know, she said, swirling her glass, you worry too much. Kids are tougher than you think. A little hunger, a little cold, it builds character. I felt my nails dig into my palms. My heartbeat slowed, not sped, calm, measured, controlled. She didn't see it, but that was my advantage. Maybe you're right, I said quietly. She blinked, surprised, then laughed again, leaning back against the headboard. See? Finally, you're starting to understand. She didn't realize I wasn't agreeing. I was studying, watching the way her fingers trembled slightly when she set the glass down. Not from fear, from weakness. From indulgence. She was careless. I tucked that knowledge away like a blade. The clock struck midnight. Its chime filled the room sharp and hollow. She yawned, stretching again. "Don't stay up too late," she said. "Tomorrow's another long day for you." I nodded, stepping toward the door. My hand lingered on the knob. Behind me, her laughter bubbled once more, softer now, almost fading as sleep claimed her. I didn't join in. I didn't even smile. I walked back downstairs, past the kitchen, past the basement door. My children stirred faintly below, one whispering the other's name. My chest ached. I sat at the table, the wood cold against my arms. I pulled out the hidden item from my bag. I turned it over in my hands, tracing its edges, feeling the weight of it. He had forgotten it was here. He thought I was powerless. But I never was. I placed it back inside carefully, closing the bag, locking the moment away for later. The house was quiet now. Upstairs, she slept with my blanket wrapped around her. Downstairs, my children shivered under one too thin. And I sat in the middle, between fire and ice, between rage and patience. I knew what I had to do. But not yet. Timing mattered. For now, I closed my eyes, memorizing every detail of that night. Her laughter, her words, the smell of burnt food, the echo of my children's cough. Every piece was evidence. Every moment was fuel. When I opened my eyes, the clock read 12:27 a.m. I stood, smoothed my hair again, and whispered to the silence. She laughed while my children starved. The words didn't tremble. They were steady. They were a vow. And tomorrow she would learn what that meant. She laughed while my children starved. The words still burned in my chest as I sat alone at the kitchen table. The house had gone silent except for the hum of the old refrigerator and the ticking of the clock on the wall. Upstairs, she was asleep, wrapped in my blanket. Downstairs, my children lay in the cold basement, their breaths shallow under thin covers. I couldn't sleep. Not after what I had seen. Not after what I had heard. I lit the small lamp on the counter, its yellow glow soft against the peeling wallpaper. My hands shook slightly as I reached for the basement key. I kept it on a hook by the pantry. She never noticed. She thought I was too careless, too distracted with work. That was her mistake. I opened the basement door slowly. The hinges creaked, making me wince, but no sound came from upstairs. I whispered down the steps, "It's me. Don't be afraid." Two little heads lifted from under the blanket. My daughter's eyes, wide and glassy, caught the light first. My son's hand clutched hers tightly, his knuckles pale. I walked down the stairs carefully, my knees aching with each step. The concrete floor was freezing and the air smelled of damp wood and dust. In the corner sat a small bowl, untouched, its contents hard and unrecognizable. My daughter whispered, "We tried not to make noise. She said she'd take the food away if we did." I swallowed hard, forcing my voice steady. "You did nothing wrong. Nothing at all." Their trust cut me deeper than their fear. I knelt beside them, pulling the blanket up to their shoulders. My fingers brushed the wall behind them, rough and cool. And then I noticed something, faint scratches etched into the paint. At first I thought it was just wear and tear, but as I looked closer I saw letters. Small, uneven, carved with something sharp. "Mom," my son whispered, pointing. "We wrote so we wouldn't forget." The words stretched across the wall in shaky handwriting. "Hungry. Please." My heart clenched so tight I could barely breathe. They had been crying out in silence, carving their pain into the walls while I worked double shifts. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small flashlight I always kept for late-night walks home. Its beam cut through the shadows, revealing more messages along the wall. She said, "Don't tell." She said, "Mom won't believe." Anger rose in me, but I kept my tone gentle. "I believe you. Every word. And she'll never hurt you again." My daughter's lip trembled. "Promise." I squeezed her hand. "Promise." As I tucked them in tighter, I noticed a small pile of papers near the baseboard. Crumpled notebook pages, folded and hidden. My son had been writing, his little pencil scratches desperate but determined. I opened one sheet and read. "She locks the door when you leave. She hides the key. She tells us you're too tired to care." I pressed the page to my chest, closing my eyes. They had been keeping record, evidence, without even realizing it. Children shouldn't have to prove their suffering, but here it was, raw and undeniable. The air grew colder as I sat there. My joints ached from the concrete, but I didn't move. Instead, I listened. Above us, faint footsteps creaked. I froze, holding the papers tight. But after a few seconds, the sound faded. She had only shifted in her sleep. My daughter whispered, "She doesn't like us talking to you. She says we make you weak." I stroked her hair gently. "Talking to me makes me strong. Don't ever forget that." They nodded, small heads bobbing, trust shining even through fear. I leaned back against the wall, staring at the words etched into it. They weren't just pleas, they were proof. Proof she couldn't erase. Proof she didn't know existed. I whispered to myself, "This house has kept secrets, but now it's telling them." That thought steadied me. For the first time in months, I felt control returning to my hands. But even as I tried to comfort them, I noticed something else. My son's wrist. A faint bruise hidden beneath his sleeve. My voice trembled despite my effort to stay calm. "What happened here?" He pulled his arm back quickly. I fell. The lie was too practiced for a child. My heart ached, but I didn't push. Not tonight. They had already carried too much. Instead, I tucked the notebook pages into my bag and kissed both their foreheads. "Rest now. Tomorrow will be different." When I climbed back upstairs, the air felt heavier. I closed the basement door, locked it, and leaned against it for a moment. My hands trembled around the key. Upstairs, I could hear soft snores. She was dreaming under my blanket, never imagining the walls below were speaking against her. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and sat again at the table. The papers rustled in my bag, whispering the truth. My children's truth. I glanced at the clock. 1:37 a.m. Too late to sleep, too early to start the day. But I didn't feel tired anymore. I felt awake, painfully awake. I thought of every time she smirked when bills went missing, every careless shrug when I asked about the kids, every laugh when I came home exhausted. The walls had shown me what I needed. Not just stories. Not just suspicions. Evidence. Still, a question haunted me. How long had this been happening? And why hadn't I seen it sooner? I gripped the glass so hard I thought it might break. Guilt tried to swallow me whole. But anger pushed it aside. This wasn't my fault. It was hers. At dawn, the house shifted. The heater rattled to life, filling the silence with a low hum. I heard her footsteps creak above, slow and heavy. She was waking up. I slipped the notebook pages into the drawer beside me and wiped my eyes. By the time she walked into the kitchen, yawning and stretching, I looked calm again. "Morning," she said lazily, reaching for the coffee pot. "Rough night." "Not rough," I said softly. "Eye-opening." She gave me a puzzled look but said nothing more. The day passed in routine, chores, work, her lounging on the couch. But everything looked different now. I saw every detail with sharper eyes. The way she avoided looking at the basement door, the way she kept her phone close, the way she smirked when the children's footsteps grew quiet below. He thought she was still in control. But the walls had given me their secrets. And secrets have power. That night, when she laughed again upstairs, I no longer trembled. I listened calmly, notebook pages tucked under my pillow. She laughed while my children starved. But the basement walls whispered the truth. And soon she would hear them too. That thought stayed with me as the morning light spilled into the kitchen. I stirred the oatmeal on the stove, my hands steady, though inside I felt the weight of every secret I now carried. The children's words carved into the walls, their hidden notes, all of it lived under my skin like fire. She walked in moments later, yawning, stretching, acting as if the house belonged to her. She had no idea. The smell of oatmeal filled the room, warm and sweet. She wrinkled her nose. "You're making porridge again? Don't you ever get tired of this peasant food?" I smiled faintly, keeping my back to her. "It keeps us full." She laughed under her breath, pouring herself coffee. I watched her reflection in the window above the sink. The way she flipped her hair carelessly, the way her eyes darted toward the basement door just long enough to betray her. She didn't notice me noticing. That was my strength. My twins crept up from the basement when I called them, their small faces pale, their voices timid. She barely looked at them, busy scrolling through her phone. But I did. I watched every movement, every glance, every twitch. "Sit," I said softly, setting bowls before them. Their spoons clinked gently against the dishes. For the first time in days, they ate without hesitation. I caught her eye across the table. She smirked. "You spoil them." They'll never toughen up like that. I lifted my spoon, blew across the steam and smiled back at her. Not with warmth. With calculation. It was the smile she never saw coming. The day passed slowly, each moment deliberate. I washed the laundry, folded clothes, swept the floors. She lounged on the couch, feet propped up, a show blaring too loud. She never noticed that I lingered near her purse on the side table. She never noticed when I slipped one bill from the stack she thought she'd hidden. Not much, just enough to confirm what I already knew. Money was missing. Money she had been taking. Later, I replaced the bill exactly where it was, smiling as I smoothed the leather strap. Evidence lived in more than words on walls. It lived in the little things she assumed I was too tired to see. That evening, when the house grew quiet, I set dinner on the table. Roasted vegetables, warm bread, tea. My children sat close to me, shoulders brushing mine. She waltzed in late, still smelling of perfume and wine. Finally, she said, dropping into her chair. I'm starving. The words hit me like a cruel joke. But I didn't flinch. I cut the bread, buttered it carefully, and handed a piece to my daughter. My son whispered thanks so softly only I heard. She didn't notice. She never noticed. Halfway through the meal, I leaned forward casually. Have you paid the electric bill this month? I thought I left the money in the drawer. Her fork paused midair. Only for a second, but it was enough. Her smile twitched before returning. Of course. Don't you trust me? I kept my face calm, my tone steady. Just asking. My children stared down at their plates, silent. But inside I knew they heard the shift. They felt it. Later that night, she poured herself another glass of wine while I scrubbed dishes. The water was hot, my hands red, the smell of soap sharp in the air. She leaned against the counter, watching me with narrowed eyes. You've been different lately, she said slowly. Quieter. I dried a plate, stacking it carefully. Maybe I'm just tired. Or maybe, she said, sipping her wine, you're starting to realize how much you need me. I looked at her, then really looked at her. Her lips stained red, her eyes foggy from drink, her posture smug. And I smiled again. Calm, controlled. Deadly quiet inside. She had no idea that my silence was not weakness. It was power. That night, I tucked my children into the small couch bed in the living room instead of sending them downstairs. She was too distracted to notice. I sat between them until they drifted off, my daughter's small hand resting on mine. In the glow of the lamp, I pulled out their folded notes again. I read the lines over and over. She locks the door. She hides the key. She says you won't believe us. I folded the pages carefully, sliding them into an envelope. My fingers lingered on the seal. Proof. Quiet, undeniable proof. The next morning, I brewed her coffee before she even woke. The smell drifted through the house. When she stumbled in, hair a mess, she smiled lazily. You're finally learning, she said, taking the cup from me. Am I? I asked softly. She didn't hear the edge in my voice. She was too busy basking in her illusion of control. I leaned against the counter, watching her sip, and thought, this is how it ends. Not with anger. With patience. With silence. With a smile she will never see coming. But patience has its cracks. That afternoon when I returned from work, I found the basement door locked again. My heart pounded as I fumbled for the key. When I opened it, my children rushed to me, eyes wide. She said you forgot about us, my daughter whispered, clutching my arm. My son's hands were shaking. She said if we told you, you'd leave us here forever. I gathered them close, their small bodies trembling against me. Never, I whispered fiercely. Never believe her lies. And right then I decided. The waiting would end soon. That evening I cooked dinner again. The smell of garlic filled the kitchen, warm and sharp. She strutted in, humming, her purse heavy on her arm. How was work? She asked sweetly. Busy, I replied, setting plates on the table. She smirked, swirling her glass. Good thing I'm here then. Can't imagine how you'd manage without me. I smiled back, steady even. Neither can I. My children looked at me, puzzled. They didn't understand yet. But they would. After dinner I asked her about the bills again. Calm. Polite. Just curious. She snapped this time, her mask slipping. Why do you keep asking me that? Don't you trust me? I set down my fork gently. Should I? The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. She glared at me, but I didn't look away. I smiled. Soft. Patient. Dangerous. And for the first time I saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. That night when I lay in bed, I thought of every smile I had given her these past days. Smiles that weren't born of kindness but of strategy. Smiles that hid truths she hadn't yet seen. Smiles that carried the weight of secrets written on basement walls and bruises hidden under sleeves. He thought she knew me. He thought I was weak. But weakness doesn't smile like that. She never saw it coming. And soon she would understand exactly what that smile meant. I repeated that to myself as I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet but not peaceful. Her snores drifted faintly from upstairs, heavy with the weight of wine. My children shifted softly in their sleep on the couch bed, their small breaths steady. I lay between those two worlds, the monster upstairs and the innocence beside me, and I knew the balance couldn't last. The smile had been the first step. Tonight the next would take shape. I rose quietly, my joints stiff from the thin mattress. The floor creaked under my weight, but I moved slowly, timing each step with the rhythm of her snores. The kitchen light buzzed faintly when I flicked it on low. On the table lay the envelope, the notes, the scratches, the proof I had collected. I ran my fingers over it, the paper edges sharp against my skin. I didn't need to read the words again. They were carved into me now, as permanent as scars. But evidence alone wouldn't stop her. She wasn't afraid of paper. She wasn't afraid of law. She was only afraid of losing control. And I was ready to take that from her. I packed 2 small bags for the children first. Clothes, toothbrushes, the stuffed rabbit my daughter refused to sleep without. I worked silently, folding each item with care. My hands shook, not from fear but from resolve. When I set the bags near the door, I whispered a silent prayer, not for me but for them. That whatever came next, they would never again sleep on a basement floor. The house groaned with the wind outside. Snow tapped against the windows like small, urgent knocks. I checked the basement one last time. The cold air hit me as I opened the door. I stared at the walls, at the words etched into them. Hungry. Told. Please. I touched the letters with my fingertips, tracing them like a promise. Tonight, those words would no longer be unanswered. Tonight, justice would take shape. Back upstairs, I reached for the hammer in the drawer. Old, heavy, its wooden handle worn smooth by years of use. It had fixed broken shelves, loose nails, picture frames. Tools have memories. Tonight it would carry a new one. I held it tight, its weight grounding me. My breath came slow, steady, controlled. I thought of my children's hollow cheeks, their whispered fears, their bruised wrists. Each memory steadied my hand. The clock ticked past 2:18 a.m. She stirred upstairs, the sound of sheets shifting. My pulse quickened, but I didn't retreat. I waited, hammer in hand, until silence returned. When the house settled again, I climbed the stairs, each step deliberate. The wood creaked under me, but she didn't wake. Her door was ajar, the glow of the television flickering across her face. She had fallen asleep with it on, her wine glass half empty on the nightstand. I stood in the doorway watching. Her chest rose and fell, her mouth slightly open. She looked harmless like this, but I knew better. I knew the cruelty hidden behind that face. I stepped closer. The hammer felt heavier with every inch, as though it carried not just metal and wood, but every tear my children had shed. I raised it. My hand didn't shake. But I didn't strike. Not yet. Instead, I lowered it gently and leaned closer to her ear. It's my house, I whispered, my voice low. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first. She blinked, confusion crossing her face before she realized I was standing over her. Her mouth opened to speak, but no words came. I smiled again. The same smile she never understood. She scrambled upright, knocking over the glass. Red wine spilled across the blanket, my blanket, staining it deeper than before. What are you doing? She hissed, her voice hoarse. Taking back what's mine, I said simply. Her eyes darted to the hammer in my hand. She froze. For the first time, I saw something other than smugness in her expression. Fear. You've lost your mind, she whispered, her voice trembling. No, I said calmly. I've finally found it. We stared at each other, the air between us thick. The television flickered, casting shadows that danced across the walls. Her breathing quickened, sharp and shallow. Mine stayed even, steady. You don't know what you're doing, she stammered. I tilted my head. I know exactly what I'm doing. Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone on the nightstand. I swung the hammer down, striking the wood inches from her hand. The sound cracked through the room like thunder. She screamed, jerking back. "No more lies," I said, my voice low but firm. "No more games." Her eyes darted wildly, searching for escape. But there was none. I grabbed her wrist, pulling her up from the bed. She tried to resist, but her strength was nothing against mine, fueled by years of sacrifice, years of rage. I dragged her down the hall, her feet stumbling, her voice shrieking. The children stirred downstairs, but I prayed they stayed hidden. Tonight wasn't for their eyes. Tonight was for me. Down the stairs we went, her nails clawing at the railing, her cries echoing through the house. I pulled her toward the basement door. She froze when she realized where we were headed. "No," she gasped. "Not down there." "Yes," I said. "Exactly down there." I shoved the door open, the smell of damp air rushing up. She tried to pull away, but I tightened my grip, forcing her down the steps. Her screams bounced off the walls, but the basement swallowed them whole. When we reached the bottom, I pushed her into the corner where my children had once huddled. She stumbled, fell to her knees, her eyes wide. "This is where they lived," I said, my voice trembling with fury. "This is where you left them." She shook her head violently. "I never. Don't you dare lie." I raised the hammer again, slamming it into the wall beside her. Dust rained down, the old concrete groaning. "Their words are carved here. Your cruelty is written here." She whimpered, pressing against the wall. Her confidence was gone. Her smirk was gone. All that remained was the cowardice she had hidden behind laughter. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Don't do this." "Did you listen when they begged?" I snapped. My voice echoed louder than I intended, vibrating in my chest. "Did you stop when they cried?" She sobbed, her hands trembling in front of her. "I'll change. Sup. I promise." I stared at her, my grip tightening on the hammer. Promises. Empty words. I had heard enough of them to last a lifetime. I lowered the hammer slowly, letting it hang at my side. For a moment, relief flickered in her eyes. She thought I was sparing her. She thought the storm had passed. But she was wrong. I reached into my pocket, pulling out the key, the same one she thought she had hidden. I dangled it before her, letting it catch the dim light. Her eyes widened. "This is mine now," I said quietly. "You're not leaving until I decide." And I stepped back, closing the basement door, locking it tight. Her screams rose instantly, pounding against the wood. But this time it wasn't my children behind that door. It was her. I leaned against the door, my chest heaving, my hands still wrapped around the hammer. For the first time in months, the house felt balanced. The walls no longer whispered of my children's suffering. They would whisper of hers. The night justice took shape wasn't loud. It wasn't wild. It was steady, deliberate, and final. And as her screams echoed below, I whispered to myself, "This is only the beginning." Her screams echoed behind the basement door. The sound rattled the frame, mixed with frantic pounding. My hand rested on the key, still warm in my palm, my other gripping the hammer. For the first time in months, I didn't feel powerless. It wasn't my children locked in that darkness anymore. It was her. I leaned my forehead against the door, listening. Each cry, each plea was fuel. My heart no longer raced. It slowed, steady and calm, like I had been waiting my whole life for this silence, this shift of power. The night justice took shape. And fire would finish it. I set the hammer down gently on the counter and poured myself a glass of water. My throat was dry, but my mind was sharp. Upstairs, my children stirred in their sleep. I glanced at the bags by the door, ready, waiting. Everything I needed was already in place. I took a breath and whispered to myself, "Tonight it ends." Her voice rose again from below, desperate now. "Please, let me out. I won't do it again. I swear." The irony nearly made me laugh. How many times had my children whispered for mercy, shivering in the same cold, begging for food? She hadn't listened then. Why should I now? I walked to the basement door, crouched and spoke softly through the wood. "Did you hear them when they begged? Did you listen when they cried?" Her sobs choked her words. I was wrong, I was wrong. "Too late," I said simply and stood again. I moved through the kitchen with new eyes. The cupboard doors, the drawers, the bottles under the sink. I pulled out what I needed, the old canister of gasoline I kept in the shed for the snowblower, half full but enough. I dragged it inside, the metal scraping against the tiles. The smell hit instantly, sharp, heavy, undeniable. It clung to the air, seeping into the corners of the house like truth. Her voice rose in panic as soon as the scent reached her. No. No, you can't. But I could. I poured slowly, carefully. The liquid spread across the floorboards, soaking into the wood, trailing in lines that curved around the base of the walls. The sound of it glugging from the canister felt like a drumbeat, steady and final. My children stirred again. My son's voice drifted from the living room, drowsy. Mom. I walked to him quickly, kneeling beside the couch. His eyes blinked open, heavy with sleep. I stroked his hair, whispered, "Go back to sleep, sweetheart. We're leaving soon." He nodded, trusting me completely, and drifted off again. That trust was my anchor. I returned to the kitchen, striking a match from the small box I kept by the stove. The flame flickered, fragile in my hand, but its heat brushed my skin like a promise. From below, her screams grew shrill, frantic. "You'll kill us both. You'll kill your children." I shook my head. "No. They'll live. They'll never see this." I stepped closer to the basement door. "This isn't for them. This is for me. For every night I worked myself to the bone while you laughed. For every moment they starved while you feasted. For every bruise you left, every lie you told. This is mine." The flame trembled, hungry. She banged on the door again, the wood rattling. "You can't. You're not like this." But I was. Pain had carved me hollow, sacrifice had sharpened me, and her cruelty had filled the hollow with fire. "You don't get to decide who I am anymore," I whispered. And I dropped the match. The flames leapt instantly, racing along the gasoline trails, devouring everything in their path. Heat surged, the air thick with smoke, the crackle sharp and merciless. The house glowed orange, shadows writhing against the walls like living things. Her screams turned to wails, then to coughing, then to silence swallowed by fire. I stood there watching, my face bathed in the glow. My chest rose and fell slowly, no faster than it had when I was washing dishes or folding clothes. The house wasn't a prison anymore. It was a pyre. I rushed to my children, lifting them gently from the couch. "Wake up, babies. Time to go." Their eyes opened groggily, confusion clouding them, but they obeyed. I grabbed the bags, pulling them close, holding their hands tight. We walked out into the cold night, the snow crunching under our feet. Behind us, the house roared louder, flames spilling from the windows, smoke curling into the sky. My daughter turned back once, eyes wide. "Mom." I knelt beside her, gripping her face in my hands. "Don't look. This isn't ours anymore. We're free." She nodded, leaning into my chest, trusting my words as truth. Neighbors began to stir, doors opening, voices rising in shock. "Fire. Someone call the fire department." I stood still, my children pressed to me, the heat warming our backs as the snow chilled our fronts. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I only watched until the roof caved in, sparks shooting into the night like stars. No one asked me questions then. They were too busy shouting, too busy trying to help. And I was just a mother holding her children close, standing in the cold. That was all they needed to see. The fire trucks arrived, their sirens wailing, lights flashing across the snow. Men rushed with hoses, shouting orders. Water hissed as it struck the flames, steam clouding the air. I didn't move until my son tugged at my sleeve. "Mom, I'm cold." I wrapped the blanket tighter around them both, holding them as the fire hissed and groaned behind us. "We're almost done here," I whispered. Almost. Hours later, when the fire died down to smoking ruins, the crowd dispersed. The house was gone, blackened to its bones. The basement, her prison, buried under ash and ember. No one would find her alive. And if they found her at all, the fire would have erased the truth I had already burned. But my children didn't ask. They didn't need to. We walked down the street together, the night quiet now except for the crunch of snow beneath our boots. Their small hands gripped mine tightly as if afraid I might disappear too. I looked up at the sky, the stars dim through the haze of smoke, and breathed deep for the first time in years. The air was cold, sharp, clean. I thought of the basement walls. Their words, their pleas, their scratches etched into concrete. They had been answered now, not with mercy but with fire. When we reached the neighbor's porch, I knocked softly. The door opened, warm light spilling out. Familiar eyes widened in shock at the sight of us. "Come in," she said quickly, ushering us inside. "You're freezing." I nodded, guiding the children forward. As they crossed the threshold, I lingered for just a moment, turning back to look at the smoke still rising in the distance. It wasn't just a house I had left behind. It was every laugh, every bruise, every whisper of cruelty. And I had left it burning. That night, as I tucked my children into borrowed beds, my daughter whispered, "Are we safe now?" I smoothed her hair, kissed her forehead. "Yes," I said softly. "Safe." She closed her eyes, trusting me completely. My son curled beside her, clutching his rabbit. Their breathing steadied, soft and peaceful. I sat in the dark, listening. For once, the silence wasn't heavy. It was gentle. It was mine. I thought of her last words, "You can't. You're not like this." She had been wrong. Fire doesn't ask for permission. And neither did I. If this story touched you, subscribe for more powerful revenge stories and emotional journeys. Join our community of women who believe in justice, strength, and never staying silent.